Karen the Warp Spinster here. Welcome to my channel. It is nice to have you here today. I am going to be working on smaller quilts, which is, I think, great for using scraps, and you can explore different techniques, try different things. This started with me with postcards, and these are from several years ago. You saw some of them last time if you watched the previous video. And I intended them to be used as postcards, so I followed the specs from the Postal Service, the U.S. Postal Service, and it was an experiment to try sending them through the mail and see if they really would be hand canceled and caretaken, etc., etc. So I designed these with that in mind, so they were the proper size, and there are limits to the size. They have to be between a minimum and a maximum size, which I would give you, except, hang on. And then I just hand drew, this is just a piece of cardstock on the back. And in between, you know, I honestly don't, I think I had Timtex in between, which is a stiffener. And then zigzag the edges. I actually prefer a binding, but that seemed a little too risky for going through the Postal Service system. So this one I mailed in an envelope. This one I mailed as a postcard, and honestly, I don't know that it was hand canceled. I was able to rub off some of it, but on this yellow you can see that there's some darkening and some smudging, and I don't think it was hand canceled. No big deal. This was just a test, and it's not exactly, you know, museum quality art to begin with. But that actually told me that I wouldn't really want to mail them as postcards anyway. I went and looked on the Postal Service's website today, and I think they've changed things since I did these. For just a standard postcard where anybody can slap a stamp, a postcard stamp on it and send it off, the thickness specifications now are like 1/60th of an inch, which no quilt of mine is ever going to be that. I defy anyone to make a fabric quilt that's only 1/60th of an inch thick. There is a 1/4 inch. As near as I can remember, the 1/4 inch was the standard thickness limit for postcards in the US at the time I was doing these. Now that seems to apply to only to business mail, which means they would be promotions, etc., which is possible, I guess, but it's I think a whole other set of circumstances special to doing business mail. So because of that, and also because this is what it looks like when it goes through as a postcard, if I were doing something as a postcard now, I certainly wouldn't send this through because it definitely would get smudged and messed up. So this one I would mail. I'm going to keep this one because I really like it. I would go ahead and throw it in an envelope and mail it. Not a big deal. It's a little bit more money, but it would arrive safely, and that would be fine with me. You could still make it like a postcard if you wanted it to look that way, although you wouldn't want to encourage anybody to send this to somebody else in the mail. So that is my postcard saga. Take it as you will. If you are from outside the US, you can check your own postal regulations. In the US, I'm just, you know, not very trusting of it going as a postcard. So, not as postcards, but I actually like this size just because you can do some neat things in a small area. It's not going to take you forever, and you have something that you can send to somebody. So these are, let me just measure this. This is 4 by 6, actually a little bit more than 4 by 6, which is little bit outside the regulations. This one should be okay. Anyway, so of course, if you are going to throw them in an envelope and mail them, sorry, I have to cut this thread, then you don't have to worry so much about the size. All right, so that's postcard size. But what I kind of want to explore today is the artist trading card. And in my surface design and other kind of worlds, art worlds, artist trading cards are bigger than I think they are in the quilting world. But I love the concept. So an artist trading card, or an ATC, is 2.5 inches by 3.5 inches, and that's what this size is. I have cut this card to this size, so you can see just by, put a ruler next to it so you can get, it's sort of on a ruler, but so you can see the relative size. It's pretty small. Here's the postcard. It's pretty small for a quilter. So it has that limitation. And all artist trading cards are 2.5 by 3.5 inches, which is the same size as the sports trading cards and Pokemon and all of those other trading cards. The thing about, there are also art cards, editions, and originals, which are the same size. They are the same as artist trading cards in every respect, except that artist trading cards are traded and ACEOs are sold. So they are both little pieces of art from your own hand. And there are really 3 different types of ATCs or ACOs. I'm going to use them interchangeably from here, and you'll just know that ATCs are for trading and ACOs are selling. There are one-offs, which are only one of these has been made. Then there are series, which may be several cards on the same theme. And then there's an edition, which are cards that are designed to look the same. So I want to work either in one-off or series for the most part. The edition, I don't want to mass produce them. So I'm going to stick with either one-off or a series. And for me, a series I think would be if I did, say, these. They aren't exactly the same. They are individually done, but they're very similar. So I think I would call those a series. This one would be a one-off, unless I do others that are using this kind of shape or the 1950s signed sort of shapes or vibe, which is how this one was designed. I just love that. I've got to do a full-size one. Anyway, so that's sort of what I'm thinking of doing. Now, the other thing about ATCs is you put information on the back, so people know what it's all about. So it's like signing your quilt. And it should have the artist, the date, the title of the work, and then the number. So if it's a series or edition, then you might want to put the number, such and such a series, number 3 or whatever. You could also put on contact information and notes. I found a pretty good site. There's a blog post from Tin Teddy, and I will put a link to that below, which will give you more information about trading cards, etc., if you're interested. And of course, you can always go to Pinterest and whatever and look up artist trading cards, and you'll see all sorts of things. But we're going to think about working at this size with quilts or quilting. And since I have a lot of little scraps, I think this would be a good opportunity to use those. So that's what I'm going to play with today. And there are 2 things I want to try. I would like my artist trading cards to be able to fit in a standard ATC sleeve. So people who trade cards have sleeves they put them into to protect them. And I would like to see if I can make mine do that. Now, I don't have any of those sleeves currently. I have some coming, I think, tomorrow. So I will see whether or not various things that I try will fit into the sleeve. So one option is to do a piece, something or other, a quilty thing, and then attach this cardstock to the back, which has this information on it. And then the other option is to do like a muslin backing, and I've done this oversized because I know quilting is going to pull it up some, and then put the information on this. This is a sort of bleached muslin. It isn't very bleached, is it? A half bleached muslin. And so one of the things I want to play with is, do I want to do the quilt, do the piece roughly this size, quilt it, see how much take up there is, and then write this information on the back, trying to avoid the quilting or whatever. Or should I put the information here, leaving a margin because I know that that's going to be cut off. So I can do it either way. I think it's probably easier to put the information on first. And at this point, I'm probably not going to do contact info or notes. Although in the notes, I might do something like, I don't know, if it's a specific pattern, maybe I would say that, or crumb quilting or something. Whatever technique I used for it, I might put that on, which any quilter would know. But if a non-quilter is buying it as a piece of art, which in fact it will be, your quilts are art, then I might want that kind of information on there. Or if it's a specific fabric that I want to highlight, or a quilting pattern that I designed, whatever, I might want to put that on there. 100% cotton, whatever. Now, in between, I have a choice. Am I going to put some batting in there? Am I going to do some flannel to keep it kind of thin? Or am I going to just slap it on the card and I'm going to zigzag around the edge? And it's going to be a fairly tight zigzag, I think, just to keep it from raveling. So those are the three things I want to try, and I'm going to start off just by doing some designing in about that size, and I will pull out some scraps, of course, in order to do that. I have some strips that I have left over from the last video, but they are reasonably wide and quite long, so I want to save those for a project that needs longer strips. Because this is the size we're working at, I can use narrower strips and, in fact, shorter strips. So things that you might not even think of as strips are usable for this. So I have some brightish colors, and then I have, of course, some black and white. I think I'm going to start with, I can use a backing just to sort of keep me on track, kind of do some foundation piecing, but I don't know that I will do that. For this particular piece, I think I want to start out with, I'll just do some sew-and flipping things here. And then I want to cross it with maybe some black and white sort of effect. And it will do something like that. I know that's a little hard to see through there, but so I think I'm going to give that a go, see how it looks. I might end up doing a little hand embroidery or machine embroidery or something to gussy it up a little bit, but I am going to start out with putting these strips together, and then I will, once those are together, then I will come back and do the sew and flip here too. So this is going to be pretty narrow, sew that, flip across, etc., etc. So that's all I'm doing, is just the sew and flip on here. I think I will start with this one. It's a little wider, so I can let that hang out over one side and trim there. This is probably about as narrow as I want for this because it's pretty narrow, and I have to allow for seams. All right, so I'm going to go sew and flip these, and I will be back. I have sewed this such that the wider strips were on the outside because I can afford to trim those more than I can the narrower strips. I'm pressing the seams open to distribute the weight, and now I want to cut this to roughly the right size. A lot of this is going to get covered, but I can visualize what I'm going to do next if I trim this. Actually, if I trim that about where it's at, this edge will be pretty much in line. And I have some pieces for something else, and then I can trim this not too straight line here so that, nope, I think I want a little more of that purple up there, so I'll cut off a bit more of this. Again, I'm leaving some margin because there will be some take up if I choose to quilt it, and I want to give it some room to do that. Now that I have that trimmed, I can see better visually. I need to apparently have a nick in my rotary cutter. Don't know when that happened. Now I can see better the size and dimensions that I'm dealing with, so as I start this, I can have a better idea of where I want to place it. I want to still be able to see this, but I want this to not be inconsequential. So I think I'll start it about there. I don't want to waste any more of the strip than I have to. And I might do, I don't mind this being very narrow. So I will go ahead and just do a 1/4 inch seam. Not going to trim that just yet until I know what size I want. So this again is just going to be sew and flip. I think this maybe will be next, and then the pink on the end, or I may want it in between. I guess I will see once I get this folded back, sewed and folded. Now on these, I am just folding it back, not pressing it open. This is such a marvelous piece on its own, isn't it? Just love that. I kind of hate to lose so much of that, so I may use a different black and white, maybe this piece, a little bit of pink in between. I think that's how I'm going to go. You know, I may in fact trim this off back here to reduce the bulk of the card. So I'm going to, and then this could be the piece, maybe I'm doing a series, and this is going to be a piece that starts off the next one in the series. If I weren't so lazy in the middle of filming, I would go down and change that rotary blade, but here we are. All right, so this one's going on next, and then I'll trim the width of it because this really is too wide for what I want. It will go off the card. Now, before I trim this, I'm going to check myself on the size here, and this could be pretty narrow. I've got a wide piece here, so that will finish out the size I need easily. So probably want this to be, I don't know, that one's what, about a 1/4 inch finished. Let's make this, I think that's going to be too wide for me. That will finish it 3/4. So I'm going to make it a little narrower. And it wouldn't have to be parallel here. I could, of course, make it a wonky piece just because I'm a wonky kind of person. Now, this, I did press that seam open. I press it open when I can without having to really make a big bulky mess with a bunch of seams, folded back on seams. So now I'm going to stitch this on, and then we can kind of size it up a little better. In the end, that was too wide. So I cut another 1/4 inch off it before I added this on. And now and then I sort of sized it up a little bit. Now, because I am a quilter, I do want to quilt this. I don't want to just put it on a card, zigzag around it, and call it good. And I just happen to have a lot of batting left over from various quilting projects. So I am going to do that, and this first one, I think I'm just going to do this muslin on the back. Now, of course, I thought about putting the information in the center, but unless I do this just right, it may not end up being much in the center. So we're going to try quilting this. Make sure I'm at least within the bounds. Sorry. Let me just zoom out so I'm not always out of screen here. It is a little oversized, so I could, in fact, probably, just trying to match up here so that I'm going to end up having the top and the back match. You know the routine. So I am going to do just, I don't know, what am I going to do? Maybe straight line and then curve down, curved over here and straight over there, or just curved. Do I want to do a little bit of something something? Maybe down here, one of my favorite decorative stitches. I think I will do that because I like this piece and I may as well do the job on it that I want, that I would be proud to give to somebody. So I'm going to do a decorative stitch here. I will get some stabilizer to put on the back. Oh, you know, a stabilizer would work pretty well, wouldn't it, instead of the batting? That's an idea, and it would add a little bit of stiffness to it. So I will cut some stabilizer that is that size, a little larger, and good idea, I think. We'll see. And then I'll do the embroidery here, and then I can put the backing on and do some quilting. I did a little bit of a tension and width check before I started it on that narrow piece, just to be sure that it was workable. And now I am ready to quilt it, and I quite like the idea of just using the stabilizer on the inside. I'll have to do a little research and see if there's such a thing as acid-free stabilizer. The cardstock that I use is acid-free. The cotton batting would be. So if it's something that you want to sell or have last for a long time, then that's something to consider. This one, I'm just going to try it out and see what happens. I kind of like the weight of it once it has, if it has batting in there as well. But, pay attention, Karen. But we'll see. I kind of like what this adds to it. A little bit of stiffener, even if I put batting in there. And of course I want something to prevent the bleed through back here. Let me see how that works if I use just stabilizer. There's still some bleed through. So what I am going to do is put some batting under here as well. And then I'm going to take a bigger piece of muslin so I don't have to try to match that up. Let me just trim that off some. And that will be enough that I don't have to worry so much about centering that piece. Even though it was a little oversized, it still would be easy for it to move off. And we know from quilting the things that can happen as we quilt, right? Okay, so I'm going to put a pin in it just to keep it from shifting too much, but I'm not going crazy about it. It's a really small piece, and I'm just, I think, going to do sort of, what do I want to do? I could do some diagonal cross hatching kind of thing. I could do just straight lines either direction. I could do wavy lines. You know, ordinarily I would be inclined, since I have so many straight lines, I would ordinarily be inclined to do wavy lines, but I'm not sure that I want to do that here. Maybe I'll do some diagonal lines here. Tis a puzzlement. I'm going to do wavy lines, see what happens. I like doing wavy lines, just improv, sit down and move around. I could not make myself do curved when I got over here. So I did curved on the left half, and then I just sort of stitched in the ditch along here and continued the diagonal there. I like that contrast between those two sections, and I wanted to continue that with the quilting. So now we are ready to trim it and add whatever we want on the back. I'm kind of liking this. I don't know how much I want to actually cut or use the card on the back. So I want to, oh, and I will say, when I was quilting, I stitched this direction, then I just let up on the presser foot, gave it a little bit of thread, turned it around so that I was not shifting things too much, just doing that alternating, which we're kind of accustomed to doing with strip quilting or strip piecing. And now I want the edges to be parallel to those seams. So now this needs to be 3.5. Let me see where that puts me over here. I would rather cut a bit more off here and retain some of this, because I'm sort of thinking of this as just a narrow piece off to the side. And of course, according to your design and your taste, that could be completely different for you. So that's the 3.5, and this needs to be 2.5. And so this is 2.5 right here. Let me, that looks about right. I would rather have a little bit more of this purple on the top and the green on the bottom, though I like them both. So cut that to 2.5. So there's my, I guess it's like a little flag, isn't it? There's my 2.5 by 3.5 inch, made entirely from scraps, except I guess the stabilizer wasn't technically a scrap. But it's got a good thickness and stiffness to it. It doesn't shadow through on the back, and I don't know, I think I'm liking that. And it's actually a quilted piece. The stabilizer adds a little bit of stiffness to it, which is good, but it still remains soft because it has that batting in it. So now I'm going to zigzag around the edge, and I think I'm going to do that in white, or do I want to do that in black? As I was stitching this, I was thinking it might, if I had a little wider piece, it might be kind of fun to do another row of this stitch in black, except offset it. So it's a little bit off to one side, and these cross pieces then hit about in between there. So that might be kind of a fun thing to do at some point. If I didn't have the stabilizer in there, I might be inclined to go in and do some more decorative stuff. I don't know, maybe on other cards I would do that. I'm almost thinking I want black around the edge. What do you think? Call out to me, give me some info here. I will have made the decision by the time this is posted and you comment, but in real time, just send it to me. I'm going to do it in black. Do I want to do it in black? This is white. Got some black. I'm going to do it in black, see what happens. Ooh. Could do part of it in black and part of it in white. Just like I sometimes split my bindings. So I could do this in white and then that in black. Or do I want to match? Do I want to go on like two sides, or do I want to match? So that would be bound with black and that with white, or do I want to do one side in white and one side in black? That's what I want to do, because that's often what I do in bindings. We'll see what happens. And I'm going to make it not a terribly wide stitch. Oh, that one's hard to see. I don't need it to be terribly wide, but I do want it to be closer together than just the standard default measurements. So I will go off and do that. What did I just say? All right, I'm going to do black here and white on these two sides. Here's my first little ATC. I learned some things. It appears that I did not cut this quite straight down there. Have to watch that. Thought I was being careful. And I started to put the information on the back. I'll think about what else I might want to put in there. But this is pretty good for a first attempt, I think. My preference is always going to be to bind something rather than zigzag an edge. But I will see if I'm going to actually trade them and expect people to put them into a sleeve. Then I'll wait until the sleeves come and see if that will fit in. Then I'll perhaps do one that is bound and see if that will fit in. They have different sleeves, so I ordered some for thicker cards. We'll see how those go. I really would prefer a binding, but what the heck? We do what we can do, right? I will actually get you a little piece. It's not an ATC, but it's a small piece. It's smaller than an ATC, I think, that I did for a 365-day project. And you can see the difference if it has binding on it. Unbelievably, I had forgotten that I'm doing a major revamp in my house. So the piece of furniture on which that small bound piece used to live is no longer in my house, and I don't know what I did with that piece. It's around somewhere. I know I didn't throw it out, but I thought I could just walk in and put my hands right on it. I was wrong. Now, for the next one, which I won't do with you because we've just gone through the whole process, you don't need to see it again, I will use the piece that we cut from here to start. And then I think I'm going to introduce a curve. And of course, there's got to be a stripe in there. And I may add some curved pieces in there, or they may just be straight, or they may be diagonal. I don't know, but I think I'll add a curve. And I think I will probably also bind it. So it's going to be essentially a smaller quilt. I won't put the batting. Will I put the batting in? I think I won't put the batting in. If I were to put some of this cardstock on the back, I would want to, no, not necessarily. All right, I'm rethinking it. Sorry. I could easily do this zigzag around it. I hand bind. So I always do the first set of stitching on the front, turn it back, and hand stitch, and you can see that's just not going to work here. So you could do it the opposite, and if you machine bind, then you may very well do it already, is to stitch the binding on this side and then fold it over. So I could do that. But if you've got that stiffer cardstock on the back, if you're a hand binder, that might get might make it harder for you to bind it. If you're a machine binder, no big deal. So, I don't know, I'll have to see when I get there. I'm going to design the piece first, and then hopefully in the future, not too distant future, I can show you how that turns out. So, we have looked at ATCs and ACEOs, and we've looked at a variety of ways you could finish it and add the information on it, make it as thick or thin as you want. I will check back in with you if I get the sleeves before I publish this. I will check back in with you and see how this fits, and maybe how a bound piece might fit. These, I think, would be a lot of fun if you've got a small group or a guild that wants to sort of do this as a project, where you could do a piece that reflects you, whether it's a more traditional kind of style, or if you do a lot of log cabin-ish kinds of things, you could do that. And then just do it as a trading thing within the group. I think I might, or if a retreat is coming up, maybe you want to propose that people who want to participate can make up a few cards for trading. I have a small group that has 6 members, and I think I belong to a group that has 6 members, and we're doing our own retreat, oh my gosh, later on this month. So I might propose this to them if I feel like I can get some more done before then. So I think that would be a lot of fun. Or if you want to sell them, if you want it to be an ACEO, say on your website or whatever, if you're going to label it as an ATC or an ACO in that case, then I would be pretty sure that I kept to the 2.5 by 3.5. If you don't want to use those specific terms, then of course you can make it any size you want. And if your guild or whomever is doing it and you just want to do it in-house, then you could set a different size. But this is just kind of a handy size if people really want to get into it with other artists or quilters. Then the 2.5 by 3.5 is probably a good thing to stick to. I have friends in other mediums of art, painters and whatnot, so I probably will stick with the 2.5 by 3.5, because then they would be compatible with any that I might trade with other artist friends. Lots of things to think about, and of course you can do your own thing. Just do your own thing, whatever size you want. I really like this as a size for a small piece to sell in my Etsy shop, so I might do that, but of course then I wouldn't be calling it an ATC or an ACEO. I would just give the dimensions and be done with it. That is it for our ATC adventure today. I will add on a little bit here if I've gotten the sleeves, so you can see how that works. A quick update, the sleeves did arrive. These are standard artist trading cards, sport trading cards, all of those things, standard size. And this does fit inside it. One that we made. Should have left this in here. There we go. So it fits nicely inside, nice protection. Isn't even glaring too much. That's cool. I made another one because I'm a quilter, and to me, quilts usually have binding, so I wanted to do a binding, and of course this black and white stripe binding was exactly what I needed to do. I also like this design. I did one of my favorite embroidery stitches down the center there. Not a lot of quilting, but a little bit. This one will not fit in here, and I knew that before these even arrived because I measured this. When I trimmed it, I did it at 2.5 by 3.5 inches, which works fine if you are zigzagging the edges. But of course, even though this is pushed right up against it, I make sure it's very full when I do a binding. There's still going to be some added bulk here. So this turned out to be 1/4 of an inch larger than the 2.5 by 3.5. So if I want to do binding and adhere to the strict 2.5 by 3.5, so that it will in fact fit inside a sleeve, then I would trim this base piece 1/4 inch smaller, not all around, just total 1/2 inch smaller, and then do the binding. When I did the binding, I cut it at 1 3/4. I ordinarily do a binding at 2 1/8, once in a while 2 inches, but 2 1/8 to do the double fold binding. So I cut it at 1 3/4 this time, and then I did a narrower seam. So I think I used a 9 in needle position on my FOF. Came out to about 1/8 of an inch, which ordinarily is smaller than I would like to use, but it's very solid on there. The edges are clean, there's not raveling, and it's covered with the binding. This is also not going to get tossed around and used like a quilt might, so the 1/8 of an inch doesn't bother me. I just didn't want the binding to be too wide because then it overpowers the quilted piece itself. But in this case, the binding was important to me, both because I could use the black and white stripe, but also because binding says quilt to me. So that is the update if you want to do ATCs. I was talking with my quilting friends, a couple of my quilting friends, about ATCs, and they are both painters. And one of them loves to do 6x6 painted pieces, so we're going to be doing an exchange of 6x6 pieces, which is, you know, a goodly size, larger than this, of course, and looking forward to doing that. It's not, you know, a standard trading size, but it doesn't matter because we're just trading with ourselves. That's it then, I think. I hope to see you next week. I think I'll do another, I think what I'm going to do is start putting Alice together. We'll see how that goes. I hope to see you then. In the meantime, be well, be safe, be happy, be quilting. Peace out.